The night I found out my husband had buried an empty coffin. I was standing in the rain with a shovel in my hands and my wedding ring in my pocket. That sounds like the beginning of a ghost story. But it was not a ghost that came back for me. It was the truth. And the truth had been waiting under red Georgia clay for 3 years, quiet as a snake, patient as a debt. My name is Mara Ellison. I was 39 when this started. I lived in Bryan County, Georgia, where people smile at church, wave at traffic lights, and keep their worst sins behind clean curtains. My husband, Caleb, owned a construction company. People called him hardworking, generous, and blessed. They said I was lucky to have him. For a long time, I believed them. Caleb and I had been married 12 years. We had a white farmhouse on Briar Road, a wraparound porch, 2 rocking chairs, and a barn he had promised to fix every spring and never did. We did not have children. We had tried, prayed, cried, and finally learned how to stop talking about it. After that, our marriage became quiet. Not peaceful, just quiet. Then my younger sister, Ruth, died. Ruth was 28, bright, stubborn, and too trusting when she loved someone. She worked the front desk at Caleb's company. He said she needed a job. I said she needed a fresh start. Ruth had made mistakes with money, men, and drinking, but she was still my sister. I brought her into our home. I fed her soup when she was sick. I drove her to meetings when she said she wanted to get sober for good. 6 months later, she was gone. They told me it was an accident. Her car went off Miller Bridge on a foggy Tuesday night. The river was high from 3 days of rain. The police said she lost control. Her car was found half crushed against the bank, but her body was never recovered. They said the current carried her away. They said sometimes the river does not give back what it takes. We buried a sealed coffin because there was nothing else to bury. Caleb stood beside me at the funeral and held my hand so tight my fingers went numb. Everyone said he looked broken. Everyone said he loved Ruth like family. I remember staring at that coffin and feeling something cold move through me. Not grief exactly. Something sharper, a question I was too tired to ask. Why had Ruth called me 7 times that night before the crash? I had missed every call. I was at a charity dinner with Caleb, and he had asked me to silence my phone because a county judge was speaking. When I checked later, Ruth had left one message. It was only 6 seconds long. I heard rain, wind, and her breath. Then she whispered, "Mara, don't trust." The recording cut off. I played it for the sheriff. He said grief makes people hear meaning in noise. I played it for Caleb. He cried so hard I felt ashamed for suspecting anything. So I buried my question with her. For 3 years, I lived like a woman wearing a mask that had grown into her skin. I smiled at neighbors. I cooked dinner. I helped Caleb host business parties. I became good at standing beside him while he shook hands with men who owed him favors. Inside, I was empty in places I did not know how to name. Then, on the 3rd anniversary of Ruth's funeral, a letter arrived with no return address. It was waiting in our mailbox between a power bill and a flyer for a new barbecue place. The envelope was plain, cream-colored, and damp at one corner. My name was written in black ink, not Mrs. Ellison. Not Mara and Caleb, just Mara. I opened it at the kitchen counter while Caleb was at work. Inside was one sentence. Ask your husband why Ruth's coffin was empty before the funeral. I read it once. Then again. Then I sat down because my knees forgot what they were for. At first, I thought it was a sick joke. Bryan County had cruel people like every place does. Maybe someone knew the old wound and wanted to press it. But the paper smelled faintly of cigarette smoke and engine grease, and there was a tiny smear of red clay on the edge. Those details bothered me. They made the letter feel less like a joke and more like a hand reaching out of a grave. When Caleb came home, I watched him before I spoke. He walked through the mudroom, hung his jacket on the same hook, kissed my forehead, and asked what I made for supper. He looked normal. That was what scared me most. I put the letter on the table. He read it. His face changed for half a second, just half a second. His mouth went soft, his eyes went still, and something hard flickered behind them. Then he laughed. "Mara," he said, "somebody is trying to hurt you." "Is it true?" I asked. "Don't do this." "That is not an answer." His voice became gentle, which was always his way of locking a door. "Your sister died. We buried what we could. You know that." We buried a sealed coffin. Because there was no body. Then why would someone say it was empty before the funeral? He folded the letter slowly and slid it back into the envelope. Because people are cruel. I wanted to believe him. A tired part of me begged to believe him. But I had seen his face before he covered it. I had seen the fear. That night, while he slept beside me, I took the letter from his desk drawer. He had not thrown it away. He had hidden it under a stack of invoices from his company. That was the second thing he did wrong. The first was thinking I was still the same woman who buried her sister. I started small. I did not confront him again. I did not accuse. I made coffee. I packed his lunch. I kissed his cheek like a loyal wife. Then, after he left each morning, I searched. At first, I found nothing. Caleb was careful. His computer was locked. His phone stayed with him. His office papers were neat enough to look honest. But men like Caleb are often careful in the places they expect you to look. They get lazy in the places they believe belong only to them. For Caleb, that place was the barn. The barn sat behind our house with a sagging roof and a padlock on the office door. He said he stored old tools there, private business records, and dangerous chemicals from job sites. I had never cared enough to go in. Now I cared. I found the spare key under the rusted tongue of an old trailer. It was exactly the kind of hiding place a man chooses when he thinks his wife is too soft to kneel in the mud. Inside, the barn smelled of sawdust, oil, and old rain. I searched shelves, boxes, and tool chests. I found payroll papers, broken drills, paint cans, and a dead mouse in a bucket. Nothing about Ruth. Nothing about the coffin. Then I noticed a filing cabinet pushed against the back wall. It was locked. The cabinet was cheap, old, and proud of nothing. I opened it with a screwdriver and 10 minutes of anger. Inside were folders from years of construction jobs. Permits, receipts, tax papers. At the bottom, in a folder marked Briar Church Storage, I found a receipt from Grady Funeral Home, dated 2 days before Ruth's funeral. It was not for burial services. Those had been paid already. It was for a replacement interior liner for a coffin. I stared at that receipt until the numbers blurred. Why would a sealed coffin need a replacement liner before a funeral? Why was Caleb paying for it through his company? And why was the folder marked with the name of the church where Ruth's service had been held? Behind the receipt was a handwritten note. Make sure no one opens it. C.E. Caleb Ellison. That was when I stopped shaking. People think fear makes you weak. Sometimes it does. But sometimes fear burns everything soft out of you and leaves a wire inside your bones. I folded the receipt, took a picture of every page, and put everything back exactly as I found it. Then I called the only person in Briar County I trusted less than Caleb but needed more. His name was Daniel Pike. He had been a sheriff's deputy when Ruth died. Now he ran a private security business out of a strip mall between a pawn shop and a nail salon. Daniel had a face like bad weather and a habit of telling the truth in ways that made people angry. Ruth used to say he was the only cop in town who did not act like Caleb owned him. He agreed to meet me at a diner 40 minutes away. I brought the letter, the photos, and Ruth's old voicemail saved on my phone. Daniel listened without interrupting. When the message ended, he played it again. Then he looked at me like he wished I had never come. "I remember that crash," he said. "Then tell me what you remember." He stirred his coffee, even though he had not added sugar. "I remember your husband showing up before the tow truck." My mouth went dry. Caleb was with me at the charity dinner. "He left for about 40 minutes. "No, he didn't." Daniel's eyes stayed on mine. "You sure?" I was sure until he asked. Then I saw the night again. The judge giving a speech. Caleb leaning close, saying he needed to take a call outside. Me nodding because I was tired and because wives nod at things they do not think will matter later. He said it was a client. I whispered. Daniel leaned back. Ruth was alive when the first call came in. Dispatch got a report of a car near the bridge. Engine running, driver's door open. By the time I got there, the river had taken the rest. Or that was the story. "What do you mean, the story?" "The sheriff told me to write it clean. Wet road. Poor visibility. No evidence of another vehicle. Accident." "Was there evidence of another vehicle?" Daniel looked toward the diner window. Outside, trucks hissed by on the highway. There were tire marks on the shoulder. Fresh ones. Wide tread. Could have been a work truck. Caleb drove a black work truck then. Everyone knew it. "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked. "He took that like a slap because it was one." I was 32, broke, and trying to keep my badge. Sheriff Wilkes said Ruth had a drinking problem. He said nobody wanted to drag a grieving family through a mess. I told myself he was right. And now I think I was a coward. That made two of us. Daniel helped me pull the first real thread. He could not get official files without raising alarms, but he knew people. A retired dispatcher, a former funeral home assistant, a clerk at the courthouse who hated Caleb because he had once cheated her brother on a roofing job. Quietly, carefully, we began to collect pieces. The dispatcher remembered Ruth's call, not to 9 or 11, to Caleb. Ruth had called Caleb at 80:47 that night, 4 minutes before she called me the first time. The call lasted 1 minute and 12 seconds. Caleb had told me he was outside taking a client call at almost the same time. The funeral home assistant remembered the coffin. She said Caleb came in angry the morning before the service. He demanded the coffin remain sealed. He said his wife could not bear seeing anything connected to the river. The assistant thought it was strange because, with no body, there was nothing to see. Later that day, she saw Sheriff Wilkes meet Caleb behind the funeral home. The courthouse clerk found something worse. 2 weeks before Ruth died, Caleb had quietly changed the beneficiary on a company life insurance policy. Ruth was listed as a key employee. The policy was worth $500,000. Caleb's company was the beneficiary. I sat in Daniel's office holding that paper while the air conditioner rattled above us. "He made money when she died," I said. Daniel nodded once. "But why would Ruth have a policy that big?" "She answered phones." "That is the question." I knew the answer before I wanted to know it. Ruth had not just been answering phones. I went home and searched her old things. After she died, I had packed most of her belongings into plastic tubs and stored them in the guest room closet. For 3 years, I had not opened them. Grief has its own kind of dust. I found her sweaters first. Then books, cheap earrings, recovery chips, a bottle of perfume that still smelled like her. I had to stop for a while. I sat on the carpet with my face in my hands, breathing through the pain like it was smoke. At the bottom of the second tub, under a stack of pay stubs, I found a flash drive taped inside an empty gum box. Ruth had always hidden things in dumb places. She said smart hiding places made people suspicious. I plugged the drive into an old laptop Caleb never used. There were 3 folders. One was called Invoices. One was called Kudos. One was called In Case. I opened Invoices first. There were scanned copies of company bills, but the numbers did not make sense. Caleb's company was charging clients for materials that had never been bought. It was billing the county for repairs that had never been done. It was hiding money through shell vendors with names like Mason Supply and Red Hill Consulting. I did not understand every detail, but I understood enough. Ruth had found fraud. The Clodos folder showed job sites, piles of unused lumber, checks, and Caleb shaking hands with Sheriff Wilkes outside a hunting lodge. In one photo, Caleb was standing beside a man I recognized from the charity dinner circuit. Judge Alan Crew. My husband had not just been cheating clients. He had been feeding money to powerful men. Then I opened the folder called In Case. There was a video. Ruth appeared on the screen sitting in her little apartment, hair pulled back, eyes swollen from crying. She looked scared but determined. She said my name. I paused the video. I could not breathe. Then I played it. Ruth told the camera she had found false invoices at Caleb's company. She said she confronted him because she thought he would explain. Instead, he threatened her. He told her nobody would believe a woman with her past. He told her he could make her look drunk, unstable, and desperate. He told her Mara would choose her husband over her broken little sister. That sentence went through me like glass. Ruth said she had made copies and planned to take them to the state attorney general, not the county sheriff, because she believed Sheriff Wilkes was involved. She said if anything happened to her, I should not trust Caleb. At the end, she leaned closer to the camera. Mara, she said, I'm sorry I brought this into your house. I love you, and I'm not drinking again. Whatever they say, don't believe them. The video ended. I sat there until the laptop went dark. Then I made the sound I should have made at her funeral. Not a cry, not a scream, something older than both. That night, Caleb came home with roses. He said he had been thinking about Ruth all day and wanted to do something kind for me. The roses were red, wrapped in brown paper, still wet from the store cooler. I stared at them and thought about the red clay on the letter. I thought about Ruth's voice telling me not to believe them. Thank you, I said. He smiled. You okay? I'm tired. You have been tired a lot lately. The way he said it made the small hairs on my arms rise. I realized then that Caleb knew I was looking. Maybe not what I had found, not yet. But he knew the mask on my face had changed. A man who lies for a living learns to hear truth breathing under a door. I needed help outside Bryer County. Daniel told me there was one safe road, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. Not the sheriff. Not the local prosecutor. Not anyone who played golf with Judge Crew. We needed a state investigator who could not be bought with a campaign donation and a dear lease. Daniel knew one. Her name was Agent Leila Monroe. She had worked a corruption case 2 counties over. She agreed to meet us in the parking lot of a closed furniture store on a Sunday morning. I handed her everything. The letter, the receipt, the insurance policy, Ruth's flash drive, Daniel's notes. Agent Monroe did not comfort me. I respected that. Comfort would have felt like a lie. She asked one question. Are you safe in that house? I almost said yes. Habit is a strong prison. Then I remembered Caleb watching me over the roses. No, I said. Agent Monroe told me to keep acting normal and stop digging alone. She said if Caleb sensed danger, evidence could vanish and people could run. She also said not to tell anyone. Not friends. Not church ladies. Not my mother's cousin who loved gossip more than oxygen. I went home with a tiny recorder in my purse and a fear so clean it felt like ice water. For the next month, I lived 2 lives. In one life, I was still Caleb's wife. I made dinner. I attended a fundraiser for Judge Crew's re-election. I stood beside Caleb while he laughed and touched my back like I belonged to him. I smiled at Sheriff Wilkes when he told me I looked stronger than ever. I did not throw my wine in his face. That was my first real act of revenge. I learned to wait. In my other life, I became a witness. Every odd call, every late night, every locked drawer, every cash envelope that passed through Caleb's hands, I recorded or photographed. I learned where he kept the second set of books. I learned the password to his old tablet by watching his thumb move on the screen reflection in our kitchen window. It was our anniversary date. Men like Caleb are sentimental about the wrong things. The second set of books told the rest of the story. Caleb had used county contracts to steal hundreds of thousands of dollars. Sheriff Wilkes protected him. Judge Crewy signed off on warrants and dismissed complaints. A county commissioner named Nolan Baird sent work his way. They called it business. Ruth had called it what it was. The night she died, she had planned to leave town with the evidence. Caleb found out. He called her and told her to meet him by Miller Bridge, saying he wanted to settle it before I got hurt. Ruth went because she still believed some part of him cared about family. I did not know yet exactly what happened at the bridge, but I could feel the shape of it in my bones. The break came from a man named Owen Grady, whose father owned the funeral home. Owen was the person who sent me the letter. I met him in Daniel's office after he finally agreed to talk. He looked like he had not slept in 3 years. His hands shook when he held his coffee. Owen said he had been working late the evening before Ruth's funeral. He saw Caleb and Sheriff Wilkes carry a heavy black bag into the preparation room. He was 24 then, scared of his father, scared of the sheriff, and scared of losing the family business. He heard arguing. He heard Caleb say, "No body. No murder." My stomach turned. Owen said he never saw what was in the bag. But later he found mud, blood, and river weeds near the drain. The coffin for Ruth's service was sealed and empty except for some stones and a damaged coat that had belonged to her. "Why send the letter now?" I asked. Owen cried when he answered. He said his father had died of a heart attack that spring. Before he died, he confessed that he helped cover up Ruth's murder. He made Owen promise to make it right. Owen waited months, because fear does not leave just because a promise enters the room. I wanted to hate him. Part of me did. But hate had become too crowded inside me. There was barely space left to breathe. Agent Monroe used Owen's statement to get warrants. Quiet warrants. Real warrants. For financial records, old phone data, property files, and the sealed evidence warehouse where Ruth's wrecked car had supposedly been stored. The car was gone. Not misplaced. Gone. The official record said it had been destroyed 2 years earlier. But the destruction order had been signed by Judge Crewy, requested by Sheriff Wilkes, and paid for by Caleb's company. That should have made the case weaker. Instead, it made Agent Monroe smile for the first time. People destroy evidence when evidence can hurt them, she said. Still, we needed more. Not suspicion. Not even fraud. We needed Caleb to connect himself to Ruth's death in a way no judge could bury. That was when I decided to become bait. Agent Monroe did not like it. Daniel hated it. I did not enjoy it either. But Caleb trusted one thing more than his friends, his money, or his own lies. He trusted my grief. He believed grief had made me weak. He believed he could guide me back into silence if he spoke gently enough. So I gave him the chance. On a Friday night in late October, I cooked his favorite dinner. Pot roast, carrots, mashed potatoes, cornbread with honey butter. The kind of meal I used to make when I still thought love could be proven in a kitchen. I put Ruth's old voicemail on my phone. I placed the recorder under the dining room table. Agent Monroe and Daniel waited in a van 3 houses down. My hands were steady. That worried me. Caleb came home in a good mood. He had won a county bid that afternoon. He kissed my cheek and said the house smelled like heaven. We ate. We talked about nothing. Then I said Ruth's name. He froze with his fork halfway to his mouth. I got another letter. I lied. He set the fork down. From who? I don't know. What did it say? It said Ruth did not die in the river. The room changed. The warm kitchen, the yellow light, the ticking clock, all of it seemed to pull away from us. Caleb wiped his mouth with a napkin. His hand was calm, but the skin around his eyes tightened. You need to stop reading poison, he said. I want to know what happened. You know what happened. No, Caleb. I know what you told me. He stood and carried his plate to the sink. For a moment I saw the husband he pretended to be. Tired, hurt, patient with his troubled wife. Then he turned around and the mask slipped. Your sister was going to ruin us, he said. My heart slammed once, hard. Ruin us how? I asked. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Don't play stupid, Mara. It never suited you. I kept my voice soft. Did you meet her at Miller Bridge? He looked at me for a long time. Then he said, she was drunk. She said she was sober. She said a lot of things. What did you do? Caleb walked toward me slow. Not rushing. Men like him do not rush when they believe the room belongs to them. I tried to help her, he said. I tried to protect you from what she was. She came at me screaming with a flash drive, threatening to go to the state. She would have destroyed everything I built. Everything I built for us. I wanted to scream that he had built nothing for me. He had built a cage and called it a home. But I needed him talking. So you killed her. His face twisted. She slipped. Off the bridge. She hit her head on the truck door first. There it was. The truth. Ugly. Simple. Smaller than the pain it had caused. He kept talking, because confession has its own fever once it starts. He said Ruth tried to leave. He grabbed her bag. She fought him. He shoved her. Her head struck the open door of his truck. She fell, bleeding but alive. He said he panicked. He said Sheriff Wilkes told him what to do. Move the car. Push it down the embankment. Let the river take the story. Later, when Ruth's body snagged downstream behind an old fishing dock, Wilkes called Caleb instead of the coroner. They took her to Grady Funeral Home. They paid the owner. They sealed an empty coffin. My sister had not been lost to the river. She had been hidden by men who thought the world was theirs to edit. Caleb was still speaking when he noticed my hand under the table. His eyes dropped. Mara, he said quietly. What did you do? I stood so fast the chair fell behind me. He lunged. I ran for the mudroom door. He caught my sleeve, and fabric tore at the shoulder. I hit him with the cast iron skillet from the stove. Not hard enough to kill. Hard enough to remind him I was real. He staggered, cursing. I got the door open. Blue lights flooded the windows. Agent Monroe came in first with a gun raised and a voice like steel. Daniel came behind her. Caleb tried to talk. He tried to explain. He tried to become the reasonable man again. But his own words were already in the recorder. And this time the room did not belong to him. When they put handcuffs on him, he looked at me with pure disbelief. Not regret, not sorrow, disbelief. He could not understand that I had stopped being his wife before I stopped wearing his ring. The arrests came before sunrise. Sheriff Wilkes was taken from his house in sweatpants while his wife screamed on the porch. Judge Crew was arrested at his lake cabin with a safe full of cash and a passport in his desk. Commissioner Baird tried to claim he knew nothing until Agent Monroe showed him his own signatures on false contracts. Owen Grady gave full testimony. Daniel turned over everything he had kept from the original scene, including notes he had never destroyed because guilt is sometimes smarter than fear. For weeks, Bryer County fed on the scandal like a starving animal. News vans parked outside the courthouse. People who had smiled at Caleb for years suddenly remembered they had always thought something was off. Church ladies brought me casseroles and questions. I accepted the casseroles. I did not answer the questions. The state found Ruth's remains where Owen said the old funeral home records pointed. An unmarked grave beyond a closed cemetery, under pine trees and poison ivy. I was there when they searched, but Daniel made me wait by the road. I watched the investigators move slowly through the trees while leaves fell around them like small brown hands. When Agent Monroe walked back toward me, I knew before she spoke. They had found her. I thought finding Ruth would break me. Instead, it gave me something solid to grieve. A place, a truth. A sister returned not whole, not alive, but no longer erased. We buried her again in December. This time, the coffin was not empty. This time, no one sealed it against my will. This time, I placed a white rose on top and told her I was sorry. The trial took almost a year. Caleb's lawyers tried everything. They said the recording was emotional manipulation. They said Ruth had attacked him. They said the death was an accident, and the cover-up was panic, not murder. They dragged my sister's old mistakes through court like dirty laundry. They called her unstable. They called her an addict. They called her unreliable. When it was my turn to testify, I wore Ruth's silver necklace under my blouse. The defense attorney asked if I hated my husband. I said yes. The courtroom went silent. He smiled like he had caught me. So you wanted revenge? Less, I said. I wanted revenge, but I did not lie, steal, bribe officers, fake a funeral, hide a body, or murder anyone to get it. I told the truth. If the truth feels like revenge, maybe that says more about him than it does about me. No one spoke for a long moment after that. Caleb would not look at me. The jury found him guilty of felony murder, conspiracy, insurance fraud, and evidence tampering. Sheriff Wilkes and Judge Crew were convicted in separate trials. Commissioner Baird took a deal and testified. The county contracts were reopened. Families who had been cheated by Caleb's company got settlements. Not enough. Money never repairs the place where trust used to live. But it was something. Caleb was sentenced to life with the possibility of parole after 30 years. He was 50, one by then. The judge from another county looked at him and said power had not made him important. It had made him careless. I remember that line because Caleb finally looked small. People asked me if I felt free after the sentencing. I did not at first. Freedom is not a door that swings open all at once. Sometimes it is a house you have to leave room by room. I sold the farmhouse on Briar Road to a young couple from Savannah who wanted chickens and a garden. I told them the barn roof leaked. I did not tell them every ghost I had left in the walls. Some things are not lies. They are burdens you choose not to hand to strangers. I moved to a small blue house near the coast, close enough to hear gulls in the morning. I got a job at a library. Quiet work. Honest work. I learned the names of children who loved dinosaur books and old men who came in to read newspapers. They pretended not to need glasses for. I learned how to sleep without listening for Caleb's truck in the driveway. But revenge has an aftertaste. People do not tell you that. For months, I woke up angry. I was angry at Caleb. Angry at Wilkes. Angry at Owen for waiting. Angry at Daniel for staying quiet. Angry at Ruth for getting into Caleb's truck that night. Angry at myself for missing her calls. Anger made me strong when I needed strength, but once the war ended, it had nowhere to go. so I carried it to the shore. Every Sunday before sunrise, I walked to the water with a notebook. I wrote down one thing I wished I had said to Ruth. Then I tore out the page and let the waves take it. I did that for a year. The first page said, "I should have answered." The last page said, "I am still your sister." After that, I stopped tearing pages out. I started writing my own life instead. 2 years after the trial, I received a letter from Caleb in prison. I knew his handwriting before I opened it. My hands did not shake this time. He wrote that he had found God. He wrote that he thought about me every day. He wrote that he hoped I could forgive him, because hate would only keep me tied to the past. He wrote 3 pages about forgiveness, and not one full sentence about Ruth. I put the letter in a metal bowl in my backyard and burned it with a match. Some people would call that bitterness. I call it knowing which doors not to reopen. A month later, I visited Ruth's grave, her real grave. The cemetery had planted winter pansies near the fence, purple and yellow, bright against the cold ground. I cleaned the stone with a cloth, pulled weeds, and sat beside her for a long time. I told her about the library. I told her about the ocean. I told her I had stopped wearing black. I told her I still got mad when someone said Caleb had seemed like such a nice man. Then I told her the part I had not been brave enough to say before. "I did choose him over you?" I whispered, not at the end, but before. Every time I explained away his temper. Every time I let him make you feel small. Every time I believed the easier story, because the harder story would cost me my life as I knew it. "I am sorry." The wind moved through the trees. Nothing answered. Nothing had to. I stayed until the sun slipped low and the cemetery gatekeeper drove by in his golf cart. Before I left, I took my wedding ring from my pocket. I had kept it for years, not because I loved Caleb, but because I did not know what to do with the proof that I once had. I pressed the ring into the dirt at the foot of Ruth's grave. Not on top. Not where someone would find it. Deep enough that it belonged to the earth. That was my final revenge. Not the trial. Not the headlines. Not Caleb growing old behind bars while the men who protected him lost everything. My final revenge was this. I gave him back to the ground, and I walked away with my name still mine. Now, when people ask what happened on Briar Road, I tell them a simple version. I say my sister died, my husband lied, and the truth survived longer than both of them expected. But here is the version I keep for myself. A man built a kingdom out of fear. A woman he underestimated found one loose stone. Then another. Then another. And when the walls finally fell, she did not stand under them and cheer. She stepped over the rubble. She went home. And for the first time in years, she slept with every light off.